welcome. I am your host, Shauna Lynn Simon, and today we're starting a short mini series specifically for home stagers who have ever wondered, could I sell my home staging business someday? Or perhaps maybe a little bit more honestly, what happens to this business when I'm done? And although this mini series has been intentionally designed specifically for home stagers, and it's going to have staging business specific references in it, the information that we're providing is honestly quite valuable for any small to medium sized business that wants to plan out their exit strategy. Now, hold on a second before you go and flip to another podcast because you say to yourself, I'm not really planning on selling my business anytime soon, so this isn't really going to apply to me. Before you turn away from this, I just want to share two very important things that you need to know. So the first is that just like staging a house for sale, the power and the profit is in the preparation. And you need to ensure that you are preparing sell-ready financials at least 2 to 3 years before you even want to sell. Even if you've been keeping great books, how you see your books and how a buyer might see them are two different things. So you really want to ensure that these are in a buyer ready state, sort of that move-in ready that we're doing for our clients. And that can take 2 to 3 years because you can't actually go backwards to fix your books. You can only go forward. So we're going to be sharing some tips and strategies in here to help you to understand what buyer ready financials look like. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is that in my experience of working with both buyers and sellers of home staging businesses, you need to know this, that you don't always get to pick your exit date. Let me just say that one more time. You don't always get to pick your exit date. I know it's a delightful way to begin, is it not? But it's true. Most business owners assume they've got time. I'm in growth stage, Shauna Lynn. I'm still building the business. I'm not ready to leave it yet. I get that. We tell ourselves, I'm focusing on just growing and building it right now. And we assume that when we're ready to sell, then we'll make a plan. Then we'll clean things up and figure it out what the business is worth, find a buyer, make a nice, smooth transition. And sometimes, yeah, that's what happens. But often that's not actually how it works because sometimes the decision comes because you're tired. Sometimes it comes because your body is telling you it's time to slow down. Sometimes it's a family circumstance, a move, a shift in the market, a team change, a warehouse issue, a big opportunity that comes your way, or simply that moment when you realize, I just don't want to be moving at this pace forever. And suddenly what felt like a someday conversation becomes a we need to figure this out now conversation. I honestly can't tell you how many times this has happened to me where I've had someone come to me and they say, I'm not planning on selling for a few months or, maybe for another year. And then when we take a look at things, we realize they should have actually started preparing a couple of years ago. And so this is where a lot of staging business owners can get a little bit caught off guard. It's not that they don't have a valuable business or they haven't worked hard or that they haven't built something meaningful, but we can't pull all of the equity and value out of that business if we haven't done the preparation. And so no one really taught them how to prepare to sell their business. And this is a fairly new conversation in the industry, and it's one that I think is so important for us to have right now, which is why I want to make sure that you get at least a good foundation of what you need to know in order to be sell ready. So this is why this short series exists. Over the next few episodes, I'm going to walk you through some of the foundational things that home stagers need to understand before selling their business, or even before deciding whether selling is actually the right move for them. So we're going to talk about what makes a home staging business sellable, how buyers look at your numbers, why your inventory is probably not as valuable as you think it is, what systems and transferability really mean when it comes to selling your business, and what the sale process actually looks like. And I want to be really clear up front. This series is not designed to pressure you to sell. Not today, not someday, not ever. This is not a sell fast playbook either. This is not you want to be quick and ready to go in 30 days. This will not do that for you. It is not about building a bigger business right now either, just so that it looks impressive from the outside, because I hear this often too. Oh, Shauna Lynn, I just need to build things up a little bit more before I'm ready to start doing some of the preparation for selling. You actually don't necessarily need to build your business bigger in order to sell, but we'll talk about what buyers actually do value. I also want to be clear, this is definitely not legal or accounting advice. I do work as an intermediary for businesses who are looking to sell. That is very different from being a broker, a lawyer, an accountant, or any of those professionals that I truly value within this field. And I don't want to say that they're not important or not valuable, because they are. This is simply to provide you with some of my perspectives from working as an intermediary. And this is about helping you to understand just the landscape of what a business sale and transaction looks like, so that you can make some better decisions. Because whether you do choose to sell in 6 months, a year, 3 years, 10 years, or even never, thinking this through this lens that we're going to be showing you through this podcast can make your business stronger right now. And that is where the real money is, right? If we can make you a more sellable business in the future, it also means we're making it easier to run now and more profitable now. So let's start with the most important distinction, which I've kind of already covered, but I just want to say this nice and clear, that exit readiness is not the same as selling. So being exit ready, just like being buyer ready for a home, doesn't necessarily mean that you're listing your business today, tomorrow, or even in the next year. It does not mean that you're walking away or that you're done right now. I just want you to have some options. It means that your business could be sold if you choose to sell it. And it means that you're not trapped or feel like you're trapped if a day does come that has you realizing that you want to or need to sell sooner than you thought you would. How many times as a home stager have you worked with a homeowner who, after preparing their house for sale, said to you, "Oh, just really wish I had done this years ago so that I could actually enjoy some of these changes," right? You've helped them to do some repairs, maybe some minor cosmetic updates. Maybe even it's just a matter of the way that you've rearranged the furniture. And they're like, "Oh, this is a better way to have my living room. Why didn't I think to do this so much sooner? I could have been enjoying this that much more." Well, the same goes for your business. What if growing your business through the lens of exit readiness made it actually enjoyable, more enjoyable now? Businesses that are easier to sell are usually also easier to run. Easier to run makes it more profitable, more fun, more aligned, more efficient, more of all the good stuff. That's what we want out of our business, right? So here's a quick test of your exit readiness. I want you to ask you a few questions right now. If you are sitting around listening to this, I'd love for you to take out a piece of paper and a pen and write your answers down, because I'd love for you to kind of track these as time goes on. But if you're driving or something or doing anything else that needs your full attention, please just take a mental note of these and maybe later come back to this and actually write it down for yourself. So here are some questions that I want you to ask yourself that will help you to identify how ready your business is for your exit. So the first question is, could someone else run this? And I don't mean you have to have a specific person who's already in your business. I mean, could it be run by someone who is not you? Could someone else understand how you quote your jobs? Could someone else step into the client relationships that you have? Could someone else understand your numbers? And could someone else take over the overall flow of things, the inventory, the warehouse flow, the team, the vendor relationships, agent relationships, marketing, proposals, install process, D-stage process, and the 1,000 tiny decisions that you make on a daily basis? If they are all living in your head, if all of these systems, if all of this information, if all the ways that you do things are living inside your head and you are the only person who knows how to do them, the answer, of course, is no. Now, if you've got team members in place who have been well trained to take over certain elements, if you have documented processes, all of those things contribute to making it a more sellable business and therefore a more valuable business. I mean, we say the same thing with houses all the time, right? Every house will sell eventually, but the price is going to dictate things and the market is going to dictate the price. And so when someone looks at a house, they're going to identify certain elements of it that are more appealing than others, and they're going to attach a value to that. And the same thing happens with your business. So the more exit ready we can make it, the more valuable it makes it. And wouldn't you love for all of that hard work to really pay off in the end? So if you're answering these questions saying, honestly, I'm not really sure that someone else could step into these positions, these roles, these responsibilities that I have, then it's a really good thing that you're here, because it means that there might be a little bit of work to do, but we can start now. We're not too late. Let's just start from today, right? One of the biggest mistakes, though, that I see business owners make is waiting until they have to sell. because then they learn how selling actually works. And let me tell you, it's a little bit of a different process than selling a house. But if you've ever watched sellers go through the first time selling a house, they're overwhelmed by the number of different steps and things that they need to be doing. Not only the things that you're telling them to do, but there's a whole process behind the scenes, the paperwork, the legal details that they're navigating at the same time that they're preparing the house physically and aesthetically for the sale. And so this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see homeowners make. It's waiting until they have to sell before they actually learn how selling works. So again, this is why this podcast mini series exists. And I understand why this happens too, right? When you're running a staging business, you're busy. You are not spending hours sitting in front of a computer screen so much as you are out on your feet in the warehouse, on the staging jobs, doing all the things that stagers do. Now, you might have built more of a team where you're more on the operations side of things and you have stepped back. You've really leaned into your CEO role, but it still doesn't mean that you're any less busy, of course, because there are a number of different decisions and opportunities that you are navigating on a daily basis. You have inquiries coming in, you have proposals to send, you have installs, D-stages, consultations, inventory, issues, purchases, shortages, overflow. You have team questions, client questions, agent relationships. You've got marketing, bookkeeping, warehouse management, and probably at least one item that you swear you saw but somehow can't find right now, and it just eats away at the back of your brain. So thinking about a future sale can feel like one of those later tasks, those someday tasks, like I'll deal with that in the future. We have that wish list of to-dos, right? That we never seem to really chip away at because the immediate things are so much more pressing. The urgent things that are really demanding our attention on a regular basis are so much more pressing that we're like, we'll deal with that someday. Now, here's the good thing though. There are some things that you may be doing already that have already helped you prepare your business for sale, and you might not even know it yet. But isn't it a good idea to know what things are working and what things will not necessarily help you when it comes to selling your business, so that you know those sooner than later? It's one of those things that, like I said, it's one of those later tasks. So it's important. You understand it's important. Like all the things on that wish list, they're important, but they're not exactly urgent until suddenly it is urgent. And the problem is that when you're trying to figure out all of this stuff under pressure, everything feels so much harder because you're trying to understand, what is the business worth? What am I going to include in the sale? It's not as straightforward. Like you sell the house, you know that all the fixtures are included, and you might throw in a few additional pieces of furniture or some patio stuff or, the hot tub or whatever, but it's pretty straightforward. A business isn't as black and white when it comes to that. So you've got to decide, what's actually included. Is it your website and your phone number? Is it the company name? Is it the client list, the vendor list? Is it the inventory, the warehouse lease, the vehicles? What exactly is included in this? And let me be clear as well that this information is valuable even if you don't own a stitch of inventory, even if you are a consultation only based business, or if you only own the small stuff and you rent the larger pieces of furniture. Whatever business model you have, I can promise you this is just as important. So, now you've got this pressure and you've got to figure out how to sell things. So you figure out, okay, what is the business worth? What am I actually going to include? Is inventory a part of the sale? You take a look at your numbers and they made sense to you as you were operating your business, but now you need to explain to someone else why you made certain financial choices that you made and what's grouped into each element on your P&L. You need to be able to answer just general buyer questions that they're going to have about the business, because it's not quite as intuitive as just walking through a house and being able to see a lot of things. And even still, how often we're trying to eliminate any questions that a home buyer has when they're walking through a house. We want to do the same thing for your business. You also want to ensure, though, that you are protecting your business brand, and that means confidentiality while you're selling the business. And so you're trying to decide, whether I should use a broker, should I sell privately, should I talk to a competitor, should I entertain a warm lead because someone approached me and said, like, hey, if you're ever looking to sell your business, I'll buy it. Or maybe you've got an employee who has expressed interest in potentially growing into that role. Do I start bringing them in now? What does this look like? So these are all sorts of great questions that come up as soon as you're realizing you need to sell. That's a lot to navigate all at once. And if you haven't really prepared, what you end up doing is reacting more than leading. And I'm sure you know what this looks like, because in a home staging business, we do this pretty regularly. There are some things that we can prepare well for. There are other things that kind of come up and we've got to just go with the flow, right? And when it comes to selling your business, which I understand your house might be your largest asset, but it's possible your business is actually your biggest asset. And so when it comes to selling your business, you don't want to just be going with the flow and navigating the chaos and figuring it out as you go. You want to be prepared. You want to make sure that it's nice and valuable. And this is where people end up leaving a lot of money on the table because they haven't done this preparation properly. And of course, your business has value today. If you were to sell it today, I'm sure it has value, but you've put a whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this business. And if you're not prepared to position the value of your business clearly, and if you haven't got it nice and packaged up for buyers, you're going to lose a lot of that money pretty quickly because presentation really is everything. So what are buyers really looking for? This is one of the things that a lot of staging business owners don't realize is that a buyer is not just buying your hard work. In fact, as much as it's appealing to them to start from a level as opposed to from zero, they're starting from a level up from that. They're not interested in just putting a number on how much you've put into the business in terms of blood, sweat, and tears. They don't care about the past of the business as much as they care about the future of the business. So they're not buying, all the late nights that you spent building your inventory. They're not buying the emotional weight that it took for you to build your reputation. They're not buying the stress, sacrifice, and the number of times that you saved a listing at the very last minute from slipping through your fingers. They are buying a business, and a buyer wants to understand a few core things. The first one is, how does this business make money? Okay, so it doesn't matter what kind of business model you have. They need to know that the business model makes money. That's what they care about. So how does it actually make money, and how predictable is that money? How much of the business depends on the current owner? So if that owner leaves, how much of this is going to potentially just drop away? I'll be real with you. There's no such thing as selling a business with a completely seamless takeover that does not seem any drops whatsoever on the initial changeover. You're always going to have the odd client that just doesn't transition well. But depending on what you've got in place in your business at the time that you're selling and how you do that transition, there's a really good chance that this business that you sell can actually grow to be even bigger and greater than what you've done with it, because that fresh buyer has a fresh energy and a fresh perspective. So I don't want you to think, oh, my clients will never work with someone else. I'm sure that they will, but also be prepared for some drop off. So they also want to know, what assets are actually included. That's not just your inventory. If I hear one more stager tell me, oh, I've got, X million dollars worth of inventory or X hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of inventory, and think that that is where you're valuing your business, let me be very real with you. We will cover this in another episode, but that is not where your business value comes in. So what other assets are actually included? And that's both digital assets, so online assets like your brand, your social media accounts, your website, as well as physical assets, which might be equipment and inventory and supplies, office space, all of those things. They care about what relationships they are already in place, what systems exist, but they also want to understand what sort of risks am I inheriting here? Can I step into this and keep it going and potentially grow it as well? And all of this is a very different lens than the lens that you use on a daily basis to review and evaluate your business. As owners, we tend to see the history. We see all the things that got us here. We remember the first client, the first warehouse, the first big inventory purchase. Heck, I still remember the very first sofa I ever purchased. Remember the first time that an agent referred us to somebody else or came back a second time to use our services. And remember the first time we hired someone for support who wasn't a family member who was obligated and voluntold that they were helping us, but an actual person that we paid real money to, even if it was still a friend or a colleague, but we paid real money to that person to help us out on a project. How about the first time that you realized, oh, wow, this is actually a real business. This isn't just a hobby. This isn't just something I'm doing for fun. I'm not just fluffing pillows. This is a very real business. Buyers don't have that history. They need the business to make sense without all the memories that you have attached to it. Doesn't mean that the emotional side, of course, doesn't matter. Sure, it does. But emotion will not replace the clarity that they need. So sell ready does not mean you need to be perfect, because I think some of us, especially as stagers, have a little perfectionist syndrome that over years we learned to let go of. But do you remember when you first started staging and every element of the stage need to be absolutely pristine and perfect. And don't get me wrong, details still matter. If the seam of the lampshade is facing out and I can see it in the photos, you've done something wrong. That is a detail that needs to be corrected. But we've also learned that sometimes getting a property 80, 90% better than what it was before, as opposed to 100%, is okay, right? So the same thing goes when it comes to selling your business, right? You're telling your homeowners to offer themselves some grace with not being able to get everything done that you want to get done for preparing the house for sale. And Sell Ready is the same thing when it comes to your business. It doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need flawless systems. You don't need every single SOP or process documented in this beautifully branded 600-page manual. You don't need a perfect inventory system. You do need an inventory system. I'll be clear on this and we'll cover this more later. You don't need your books to look like a Fortune 500 company. You don't even need massive amounts of profit. Yes, profit is good, but certain expenses can be clarified and justified and actually added back into your value. So you don't need to carry every single answer to all the questions before you begin thinking about this. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to have it all figured out. What you do need to understand are a few things. You need to understand where the value in your business is, where some of the gaps might exist, and what would need to be strengthened before a buyer could confidently step into it. And that's actually good news, because it means that this is not going to, it's not about suddenly becoming someone that you're not. If you are not a systems and process person, that's okay. We'll give you some tips for how to get yourself closer there. I don't want you to become some cold corporate machine where the whole business runs without you. Don't get me wrong. Yes, we call that an absentee run business, absentee owner run business, which means that the owner doesn't exist in the day-to-day operations. You don't necessarily have to have that. It's not going to be some big cold corporate machine. It's about making what already works more visible, more understandable, and more transferable. So here are some of the main areas that you need to think about as a home stager when we talk about preparing your staging business for sale. And the first is your numbers. So not just your revenue, which I know that's what we tend to look at. Oh, we had a really great year this year. The past 12 months have been great, or we're on track to make X number of dollars this year in terms of revenue. But you should care about how the business actually makes money. So what services are profitable? Are all your services profitable? And if so, how profitable? What does it actually cost to deliver each of those services? Do you understand what that looks like? How much does the business depend on you? We've covered this a couple of times already. How clean and understandable are your financials? We'll cover this further in a later episode as to what this actually looks like. Can you explain the story behind your numbers? So it's not just about being able to read your P&L, but if someone asks you why your marketing dollars were so high or why you spent so much on inventory, can you explain what that actually means? Because buyers are not just going to look at the numbers, they're going to interpret them. It's similar to how we tell our sellers, our home sellers, you've got to hide your medication, and we want to hide any sort of personal identifying information because we don't want our potential buyers to create these stories and narratives in their head. Instead, we want the home to tell the story of their future. And that's what we want to be able to show the buyers, is what the future of this business looks like. So then the next area, so that's your numbers. The next area is your inventory and your assets. And this is a big one for stagers because inventory carries a lot of emotional weight. Like I said, I do remember when I bought my first sofa, and I can remember someone offering to buy everything in a house that I had staged. And I'm looking at a few of the items like, oh, but those are my favorite pieces. I remember I bought this at this flea market. And I can remember the stories behind them. You've spent years building that inventory collection. You've invested tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars into furniture, artwork, accessories, bedding, warehouse equipment, supplies, and everything else that makes your business run. But buyers don't value your inventory the same way that you as a business owner do. They don't actually care how much you spent on it. You can throw that number out for that matter. It does not technically matter when it comes to coming up with your valuation for your business. They want to know, what does that inventory produce? Does this inventory actually help to generate revenue? Is it organized? Is it usable? Does it fit the market? Does it support the business model that you have? All of that matters. In fact, there's a formula for calculating your business value, and it does not include your inventory. Again, more on this later. So the third area is your systems and your operations. And when I say systems, I don't mean you have to have fancy software in place. If you do, and it's easy for someone else to step into, fantastic, but it's not necessary. A system is simply how something gets done reliably in your business. How do the leads come in? How do consults get booked? How are proposals created? How is inventory selected, pulled, packed, prepped, etc.? How does your team know where to go and what to do and when? How are your clients communicated with? How do problems get solved and resolved? You already have processes, okay? Processes exist in every business. You can't tell me you don't have them. I promise you, you do. You have a way of getting things done. The challenge is that they might live in your head, your habits, your texts, your sticky notes, your team's memory, or 17 different places that make perfect sense to you and your team, but they're going to make no sense to anybody else. And that's okay. The goal is not to document everything. It's just to identify what matters most from a buyer's perspective. And then we'll give you some tips for getting those documented. Now, the fourth area, that's transferability. A business doesn't need to run without you to be sellable, but it needs to be able to be transferable. So owner-operated businesses can sell. People are like, I'm the one who does a lot of the things in my business still. Like, I'm the main stager. I do most of the consultations. No one's going to want to buy that. Sure they are. You wanted to do that business, right? Someone else is going to want to do that business. So owner-operated businesses can absolutely sell. Owner-dependent businesses are harder to sell. That there's a difference. So owner operated means that you're still very much involved in things, but owner dependent means that it literally can't function without your memory, your instincts, your relationships, and your constant involvement. So the more transferable a business is, the more confidence your buyer is going to have. And confidence can affect your entire conversation and the value of your business. Okay, now the fifth area is the actual sale process, because selling a business is not just, oh, cool, I found someone who might want to buy it. Now we'll just send them everything that I have in my business and they can take a look at it. And then we'll come up with a number and we'll figure it out. Please don't do that. In fact, please don't send anyone anything without first listening to this podcast, because I'm going to talk a little bit later on about what the flow of information should look like when you have an interested buyer. There is a process to things, and there is a way to protect your confidentiality and the integrity of your business. There's a way to qualify your buyers. There's a way to share information with them. And there are conversations around price, structure, inclusions, timelines, transition support, due diligence, and closing. And all of those things come in due time. And if you don't understand the process, it's really easy to overshare too early or underprepare certain things, where you can end up losing your leverage. You end up losing some of the value of your business because it wasn't communicated properly, and you waste time with people who are never serious buyers in the first place. So here's the part that I love the most about all the work that we're going to be doing throughout this podcast, is that even if you never sell, this process can make your business so much better. Because when you look at your business through a buyer's lens, you start asking better questions. You start to notice where the business is dependent on you. You start to see which services are actually profitable. That's good information for running day to day, right? You start to understand what your inventory is doing and what it's not doing, what pieces are not moving. You start to clean up the way that you're tracking things. You start to make decisions based on value of a task, not urgency of a task. You start to build a business that is less chaotic, less reactive, and less reliant on you being the person who remembers everything. So that gives you options. You might decide to sell. You might decide to keep the business, but step back into a different role and let someone else step forward. You might decide to bring in a manager of some sort. You might decide to restructure a little bit. Once you've got that clearer lens, you might take a look at your team and realize you're too heavy in some areas and too light in other areas. You might even decide to stop offering certain services, or at least stop promoting them. You may decide you want to grow. You may decide, I'm good at the size that I'm at. You might decide to even simplify further. But those are all decisions that you're making with real information, not a panic, not because of a sudden market shift, but with real valuable information. So in order to help you to start thinking through some of these, I've created a great resource for home stagers who want to better understand what it means to build a sell-ready business. And you can actually get this on my website to help you to understand how sellable your business is now. There's even a free worksheet with this that helps you to understand how sellable is your business now and gives you some tips for creating a more sellable business. So you can grab it at slsacademy.com/sell ready. This is a free ebook if you use the code SELL100. Okay, so use the promo code SELL100 at checkout and you can get this book absolutely free. It's at slsacademy.com/sellready. And this ebook's going to help you to start thinking about what you've actually built, what a buyer might care about, and where you might need to make some changes before making any really big decisions. So again, getting this ebook, similar to listening to this podcast, doesn't mean you're going to be selling tomorrow, but it means that you're willing to look at your business a little more objectively, and that's going to do so much more for your business right now. Now, as we go through this series, I'll also be sharing more about my Sell Your Staging Business Bootcamp, where we go much deeper into this work. Inside the bootcamp, we look at your business through the lens of value, readiness, buyer confidence, systems, financials, inventory, deal structure, and transition planning. And this is a high-touch group live coaching program that covers everything that you need to know about preparing your business for sale. And it's ideal for someone who's looking to sell down the road. But if you're looking to sell sooner than later, this can also be valuable for you. So if this series has you realizing, okay, it's a little bit more to this than I thought, and I want to actually start thinking about this sooner than later, then you can learn more about the bootcamp as well at slsacademy.com/sellyourbiz, B-I-Z, sell your biz. For today, just start with the ebook. Again, that's at slsacademy.com/sellready, and check it out. In the next episode, we're going to actually talk about what makes a home staging business sellable, because this is where a lot of owners tend to get a little bit surprised. A busy business is not automatically a sellable business. So just because you've got jobs every day does not mean that you're sellable. Business with a warehouse full of inventory is not automatically worth what the owner thinks it is usually. So next time we're going to look at your business through that buyer's lens. We're going to talk about what buyers look like coming into this industry and what someone's really going to be reviewing when it comes to your business. So go ahead and grab the free ebook, slsacademy.com/sellready. Use the code SELL100, SELL100, and start thinking about this question. If someone looked at your business today, would they understand what makes it valuable? It's just like your home. When you're looking at your home objectively, you see the value in it. You know all the things that you've done to it. You know what you've done to make it great. But does someone else see that? Or does it need a little bit of preparation? Because if the answer is not yet, that's not a problem. It's just your starting point. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Stay tuned and we'll see you soon.